Hello and welcome to today's mini lesson. We are inside the PE portal today looking at social groups and the barriers that they might come across. So we're going to start over here with the groups. So when we're talking about barriers and groups, what we're talking about is a collection of people that can usually be categorised by one or more characteristics. And these groups in particular come across more barriers than your typical person or people who aren't from within these categories of society. So the first one that we have is gender. So typically men and women, they can both come across barriers to participation, but it tends to be women who come across more things that stop them from getting involved in sport. The next, we have age. And we'll go through exactly what some of these barriers are in a moment. But age, we have the two extremes. We've got the young and we have the old. Your middle-aged or your working population, 18 to 50 or 18 to 60, typically they've got more opportunities to be involved with physical activity. Next down, we have a collection of race, culture, and religion, whereby someone's background or someone's belief or the culture that they've been brought up in, that might limit their choices available to them. So different belief structures that they personally believe might prohibit them from pursuing certain sports or activities or at certain times of the year or with different people. As such, the provision hasn't been adapted yet to people of certain races, cultures or religious backgrounds. Next we have disability. So disability, where those who are restricted in some way, be it physiological or psychological, there's not as much provision or coaching or officiating or competitive opportunities to actually enable them to get involved in sport. So it might be a leisure centre, for example, might not have the access ramps for those in wheelchairs. They might not be able to ring-fence times where they can give the sports halls or the swimming pools over to the specialist staff who can then lead disability sport. And lastly, we have peer groups or friend groups or family. So family and peer groups. So people that find themselves in a group of friends or from a family dynamic where the people that they're around put up the barriers themselves. So this could be belief structures, it could be societal norms, it could be peer pressure. It might be that no one in the family likes being physically active, therefore the children might not follow sport or activity either. It might be that they're very narrow-minded in the sport that they like and what they pursue, therefore they want their children to pursue that sport as well. So we've got a variety of groups, and the people that can fall into these is pretty much the whole population. But in these particular groups there can be, in certain regions, certain countries, additional barriers that pop up which might limit their involvement in activity. So what are some of these barriers? I've been trying to come up with a way to sort of list all of these words with an acronym, and so far what I've got is a fear of streams, or a stream fear. And we'll go through each of these in turn and just unpack them a little bit. So we'll start off up here with S, whereby we have stereotypes. So it might be that the societal norms are that people from a certain group don't get involved in sport, or perhaps a particular sport. It might be that people expect people within these groups to do certain things. So if I were to ask you the question, what would you expect a child to be doing for sport? What would you expect an old person to do for sport? Straight away in your mind you probably conjure up an idea or an image or a little clip of these groups doing sport. Now that's not necessarily your fault, that's just how you become conditioned through societal norms, through general conversation and through almost a little bit of prejudice undercurrent that's been going on. Now you're not necessarily at fault for that, it's the inputs which actually shape your own opinions. So these stereotypes, these lasting categories that people try and put people in, that can cause people to actually stay in that category if they believe it themselves. So let's take a woman, for example. The stereotype is to not lift weights, or to lift weights which are lighter, not to go into Olympic powerlifting. Now that's by no means the case. But if a woman believes that to be the case and the way the world works, then they might opt out of doing powerlifting even though they might be really good at it. So stereotyping, that definitely comes into it. Next one we have is time. People of certain ages, young people, they're at school for half the time. Older people, they've got loads of free time. Working population, they're probably busy 9 till 5 if they're the average person. And then either side of that, they're taking care of their children. So there's barriers for people of all ages. It could be people of certain races or cultures or religions. For certain times of the year, for example, during Ramadan, people of faiths, they can't actually exercise. It's not that good for them because they're trying to fast from sun up to sundown. So they might not have the energy. It'll be difficult for them to participate. It might be that the people with disabilities, they have got periods of time available to them, but the facility providers, they don't timetable it in line with them. They haven't got as much flexibility when they can actually turn up and use the space and participate. So time is a big one. Similar to what we just said there, religion. So at different points during the year, different religions, they might observe different festivals or different pastimes or cultures. Therefore, they might be prohibited or limited in what they can actually pursue. It might be, can they participate in sport in front of men or in front of women? Can they wear appropriate sportswear, or do they have to wear restrictive wear that's in line with their religious beliefs? Next up, we have education. Now this is twofold. This could be the education system, so people within school, so people of a certain age or people of a certain peer group within the education system, they might be limited in what they can do. They might be forced into doing something because that's what the curriculum says they are timetabled to do, but they don't enjoy it. Or they don't get to do what they really like to do because there isn't the facilities at the school. Wrapped up within that though, other than in the school system and during PE lessons, when else do we expect people to actually learn how to participate in sport safely, how to learn the rules, where to go, how to use gym equipment, how to actually pursue a healthy, active lifestyle? And if people don't pick that up in school, how do we expect them to then take it into the real world as they get older? Next up, we have attitudes. Now, attitude is someone's belief directed towards something else. Okay, someone's belief directed towards something else. And if someone has developed a negative attitude because they've experienced negative outcomes because of physical activity, they're less likely to go and pursue it again in the future. Now, what's caused those negative feelings? That could be any number of things. And it could be part of their group that's caused those. So, for example, gender, women, they might be ridiculed or criticised or looked down on if they have got involved with sport in the past. And if they did that from perhaps a younger age, they're less likely to pursue it into adulthood. It might be, for example, young boys who, if they pursue something like dance or gymnastics or something a little bit more artistic or expressive, they might receive comments asking them, well, why don't you play a real sport like football or basketball or rugby? So those sorts of things can harm someone's attitude. It can turn it into a negative one, and it might move them away from what they want to do into something that they think they have to do. And if you have to do something, then you're probably not going to enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, you're going to stop it. So we have stereotype, time, religion, education, attitude. Down here we have media. Now the media plays a huge role in lots of these different things. It can help create the stereotypes that might pigeonhole people into certain sports and activities. It might act as people's main source and form of education after school. So actually publicising different sports and activities and government guidelines, that might be where people are picking up their information from. And if it's negative or it's geared in a certain way, it might not be conducive to promoting physical activity. Next, we have this FEAR acronym. The first one we have is familiarity. I'll put there, familiar. People do what they're used to doing. People do what is around them. People don't like to change their habits. So if joining a rock climbing society would take going out of their comfort zone with no one else to support them, to a location that they've never been before, to buy all the equipment that they don't know how to use, if it's completely unfamiliar to them, they're less likely to make that leap. What might be familiar could be what the parents have done, what the siblings do, what they learned at school, what they pick up through media or social media. They might be following purely the stereotypes. They might be listening to their friends or their peers. So they might not be willing to step into a different lane to try something new, even though the new thing might be the best thing that they've ever done. Which leads into our next one quite nicely, which is family. Now I know that we've got a group down here, people within families or within peer groups that might limit them, but it's also part of the barrier, which is the parents dictate what children do. The parents often set the stereotypes up, they set the societal norms. So if the parents are interested in a certain sport, the children will more likely be pushed into that interest as well. Not all the time, but some of the time. A lot of the time it's just the children wanting to be like their parents. So they might ignore opportunities to go into something else and instead follow in the footsteps to be a bit more like their parents. Our next one is E, which is economic, which again ties quite nicely into family, because if it's, especially in the parent-child dynamic, it's the parents paying for the child's interests. And if the parents can't actually afford the specialist equipment required for certain sports, then the children probably aren't going to go and do it. So in lower socioeconomic standings, it might mean that children are limited in their opportunities. They have to make use of the socially provided facilities and spaces. They might need to use the free facilities, the ones that don't require equipment. They might not be able to pay for extra coaching or extra sessions, so they can only play or participate in their own time, which might limit their progress. Therefore, they don't experience the competitive nature of sport, and that might change their attitude into a negative or a bored one. So, we've got stream, we've got fear, and next one here for A, we have adaptation. Now, some sports have been adapted brilliantly, and this one in particular links into disability. So there are mainstream sports that have been running for a number of years, and they're promoted through the media, they're participated in at top level all the way down to grassroots level. It's established. But what if someone can't access those rules? They can't access that facility or access the facility or the equipment or the skills. What's their option? Well, some sports haven't been adapted. Now, gradually over time, a lot of them are being adapted, or alternatives are being designed. For example, football is now a blind football option. So people with impaired vision or lack of vision altogether, there's now a different form of football which resembles your mainstream football, but now it's got bells inside of it. There's lower numbers on the pitches, the spectators must be silent. So it's changed ever so slightly. Tennis changed for wheelchair tennis. Now there's 2 bounces that are allowed within wheelchair tennis. So the mainstream sports that have changed and can change are changing, which is an improving, or it's a diminishing barrier to disability groups. But that takes time, it takes costs, it takes a new administration to set up this brand new sport. And facilities like leisure centres or parks, they might not be able to offer all of the mainstream, all of the adaptations. Therefore, where is the opportunity? So it might exist, but is it available? Is it accessible? So stream, fear, we've got R, we've already had religion. Our last R is role models. role models, linking in with media, linking in with family or peer groups, linking in with stereotypes. Are the media actually publicising the top athletes or the relatable athletes, which can actually sell someone on a whole range of different activities or sports? Or do the media just focus on a select few popular mainstream sports, such as the team games, cricket, football, tennis, or doubles in tennis for the team games, rugby, national sports? Or do they actually cover lifelong activities? Do they cover any sort of news events to do with running, or yoga, or fitness, or gym, CrossFit? Anything like that? Does the media actually publish that? Does it promote individuals who are very good at that exercise or activity? Not at the moment. It's very limited in what it talks about, therefore the stereotypes that form, what people are familiar with and might actually go and pursue, that's limited as well. Very significant for gender. There's far less female role models publicised in the media compared to male role models. The effect: men see men doing sport and being successful, women see fewer women doing sport and being successful, therefore women are less likely to pursue it themselves. Now that's a sweeping statement, but that's what the media is currently doing. It's not a 50-50 split. You could argue that, well, there isn't a 50-50 split in sport participation, so why would there be a 50-50 split in publicisation? But they've got to change first. If they publicise more fairly, then the sport participation will become more fair. And our last one, our final A, is, just looking here, access. A point which we've almost covered within everything else. But access is the facility, the locations, the coaches, the equipment. Are there timetabled slots at facility spaces for people of all groups to attend? Not just for your bog standard average person who could walk in and they're not thinking about any of these or any of these. So are there timetabled slots for women only, where people of different cultures and religious backgrounds are more comfortable in that environment where there's no men? Is there an over 60s swimming slot at the local pool where older people are more comfortable to go in because there's no young people jumping in, or there's no faster people swimming? I'm not saying older people are going to be slower necessarily, but they might prefer the social aspect, going where they know the majority of people are going to be retired. So access. Is there actually the space and the time available at the locations for these groups to participate? And that is that. Social groups and barriers. I've tried to come up with those two acronyms there with a stream fear, but it might just take a little bit of memorisation. But the groups, we've got gender, age, race, culture and religion, disability, and then family or peer groups. So I hope you found that useful, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next one. Bye for now.